Literary texts don't stand alone. They exist and should be viewed in larger surrounding frames or contexts. You might think about context as the stuff that surrounds a literary text. If you can find information about a text's context, then you can use that information to help you develop an interpretation. There are many different types of contexts. Biographical context, for example, the author's religious beliefs; cultural context, for instance, changing attitudes toward gender roles; and literary historical context, such as the conventions of a literary genre. These are some of the contexts that scholars often find useful. Let's take, for example, a poem by Billy Collins called The Names.
Yesterday, I lay awake in the palm of the night. A soft rain stole in, unhelped by any breeze. And when I saw the silver glaze on the windows, I started with A, with Ackerman, as it happened, then Baxter and Calabro, Davis and Eberling, names falling into place as droplets fell through the dark.
The first 7 lines raise several questions that the poem does not answer directly. Why does the speaker of the poem lie awake? To whom do these alphabetized names belong? Why are they described as falling into place? Why are they compared to falling drops of rain? Let's begin broadly. What can we find out about the poet Billy Collins and the time and place in which he wrote the names that might help us make better sense of its textual elements? Biographical context tells us that Billy Collins was Poet Laureate of the United States, our country's official national poet, from 2001 to 2003. He wrote the names in 2002 and read it that year before a special joint session of Congress. But these biographical facts may point toward a historical or political context for the poem that goes well beyond what we know about Collins as an individual. Let's see what happens if we read more of the poem.
In the morning, I walked out barefoot among thousands of flowers, heavy with dew, like the eyes of tears. And each had a name, Fiore, inscribed on a yellow petal. Then Gonzales and Hahn, Ishikawa and Jenkins, names written in the air and stitched into the cloth of the day. A name under a photograph taped to a mailbox, monogram on a torn shirt. I see you spelled out on storefront windows and on the bright unfurled awnings of this city.
Tear-filled eyes, a photo taped to a mailbox, names in storefront windows. All these images suggest that this is a memorial poem. Given these contextual facts, we might suspect that The Names is about the terrorist attacks in New York City on September 11, 2001. A Google search for the names of the 9/11 dead removes any doubt. Each name Collins has chosen, Fiore, Gonzales, Hahn, Ishikawa, Jenkins, appears on the list. But why did he choose these names to represent the thousands of people who died that day? To answer that question, let's step back and look at the poem in an even broader context, our knowledge about the multi-ethnic makeup of the American people and the national ideal of unity and diversity, e pluribus unum. This broader contextual knowledge helps us see that the names Collins has chosen are ethnically diverse, as if to emphasize the country's historic welcome to immigrants. In highlighting these diverse American names, which the poem describes as stitched into the cloth of the day, Collins's poem is stitching itself into a long-standing fabric of American self-representation. Okay. We've talked about contextual frames related to Collins as an individual, to the specific historical moment in which he wrote the poem, and to the broader social context of a nation of immigrants. But what about potential literary historical contexts, such as other poets whose work Collins might have had in mind? Collins is no doubt aware that he is participating in a long-standing poetic tradition of celebrating America in times of national crisis. That tradition goes back at least to the Civil War and to Walt Whitman, America's first self-appointed national poet. Indeed, Collins's rhythmic free verse, incantatory repetitions, and inclusive catalogues of people's roles in life names of citizens, workers, mothers, and fathers, recall Whitman's celebratory catalogs of ordinary Americans and their diverse occupations. Here's another excerpt from Billy Collins's The Names.
Names etched on the head of a pin. One name spanning a bridge, another undergoing a tunnel. A blue name needled into the skin. Names of citizens, workers, mothers, and fathers.
And here's Billy Collins himself reading Walt Whitman's 1867 poem, I Hear America Singing.
I hear America singing, the varied carols I hear, those of mechanics, each one singing his as it should be, blithe and strong, the carpenter singing his as he measures his plank or beam, the mason singing his as he makes ready for work or leaves off work, the boatman singing what belongs to him in his boat, the deckhand singing on the steamboat deck.
As we can see, literary works are often in dialogue with other literary works across time. However, they can also refer to other cultural objects and help us think about broader social questions. Let's return to the text of Collins's poem and consider its concluding lines.
Alphabet of names in a green field. Names in the small tracks of birds. Names lifted from a hat or balanced on the tip of the tongue. Names wheeled into the dim warehouse of memory. So many names. There is barely room on the walls of the heart.
That final image of a wall filled with names recalls one of the country's most famous pieces of public sculpture, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., designed by Maya Lin and dedicated in 1982. The wall, as it is commonly called, is covered with the 58,286 names of those who died in that earlier national trauma. How might thinking about Collins's Walls of the Heart in relation to Lin's monument enrich or complicate our understanding of the poem? What can be gained, in other words, from thinking about 9/11 in connection to the Vietnam War? As we've seen, Collins's The Names may be understood in relation to national events, cultural traditions, and other works of art. But texts can take on additional meanings when historical circumstances change. For example, does The Names take on new implications now, many years after 9/11, amidst ongoing debates about immigration and walls? How might future contexts we can't yet predict affect our interpretation of Collins's poem? We've used the rich text and multiple contexts of The Names in this video to demonstrate the following: that there are always a number of potential contexts that one might consider when interpreting a literary work. The challenge for a literary critic is not to choose the right context. In truth, there is never only a single correct context to be found. Instead, we want to explore potentially relevant contexts, and then think about how they might clarify, deepen, or even change our understanding of a text.